The time has come. After months of silence, speculation, betrayal, and chaos, Roman Reigns has finally returned. But he didn't come back as the same tribal chief, he came back changed, humbled, vengeful, and more dangerous than ever before. And what's even more shocking is who he brought with him, the man who once embodied comedy in WWE, the man everyone underestimated, R-Truth. In a jaw-dropping twist that has left the WWE Universe in disbelief, R-Truth has now aligned himself with Roman Reigns. Together they've issued a terrifying warning to the locker room: the OTC is here, the ones that conquer. The air in the arena on that fateful Monday night tasted of static electricity, thick with an unspoken premonition. It was a tangible hum, a low-frequency vibration that bypassed the ears and settled directly in the gut, signaling an impending seismic shift about to rip through the very fabric of world wrestling entertainment. For 5 agonizing, interminable months, the WWE Universe had collectively held its breath, a vast, global audience suspended in a purgatorial state of speculation, longing, and gnawing uncertainty. What had become of Roman Reigns? The undisputed tribal chief, the seemingly unbreakable cornerstone of the company, whose reign had ended not with a whimper of defeat in a fair fight, but with a betrayal so profound, so venomous, it echoed across continents and through every digital corner of the wrestling world. Tonight, that suffocating silence was destined to be shattered, not by the familiar roar of the crowd or the bombastic entrance music of a conquering hero, but by a chilling, rhythmic drumbeat, a primal, ominous throb that resonated through the rafters, acting as the sole harbinger of a new, terrifying era. And when the arena lights, with a sudden, dramatic flick, died, plunging Monday Night Raw into an abyss of inky blackness and heightened anticipation, no one, absolutely no one, could have truly predicted the chilling spectacle that followed: the return of Roman Reigns, not as the champion we knew, the beloved or reviled tribal chief, but as something far more dangerous, far more vengeful, and chillingly transformed, accompanied by the most unlikely, and terrifyingly reforged, ally, R-Truth. To comprehend the magnitude of this reawakening, we must first cast our minds back to the grandest stage of them all, WrestleMania 41. It was meant to be the coronation, the ultimate gilding of Roman Reigns' already legendary legacy in pure, unadulterated gold. For years, he had navigated the treacherous waters of WWE, rising from the divisive cries of "Boo Roman," to the universally acknowledged, almost mythical status of the tribal chief. He had conquered all challengers, unified titles, and built a dynasty, the bloodline, that seemed as impenetrable as a fortress carved from granite. He walked into the main event of WrestleMania 41 with the weight of that legacy, the undisputed gold of both the WWE and Universal Championships slung over his shoulder, and a confidence that bordered on divine right. The 75,000-plus strong crowd, a sea of passionate humanity, buzzed with electric anticipation, ready to witness another chapter in the seemingly unending saga of Roman's dominance. The world was his, the main event his stage, and victory a mere formality. Yet, the script of destiny had been subtly, maliciously rewritten. It shattered him, not with a thunderous impact, but with a silent, insidious knife in his back. The tribal chief walked into the main event a king, and walked out a ghost, his kingdom crumbled, his spirit seemingly fractured, all courtesy of the most unexpected assailant, Jimmy Uso. Yes, Jimmy. The brother. The one who had always seemed destined to live in the shadow of flashier headlines, the one often perceived as the more amiable, less calculating of the twin Usos. In a single, sickening, earth-shattering moment, he delivered a super kick. Not to an opponent, but to the jaw of his own cousin, his own tribal chief, in the very heart of the main event. It was a blow that reverberated beyond the physical, a strike against loyalty, against blood, against the very foundation of the bloodline. The impact was visceral, not just on Roman, but on every single fan watching, their collective gasp audible even over the roar of the crowd. That super kick didn't just cost Roman Reigns the undisputed title, it cost him everything. And then, in a twist that sent shivers down the spines of millions, Jimmy didn't walk away alone. He walked away with the sinister architect of it all, the grand puppeteer who had orchestrated this devastating betrayal, Paul Heyman. In that one sickening, heart-wrenching moment, as Roman lay stunned and defeated, Jimmy Uso, with a chillingly triumphant sneer, proclaimed the dawn of the Heyman Empire. The bloodline, once a symbol of unbreakable familial unity and dominance, dissolved in front of 75,000 stunned fans, leaving behind only shattered pride and echoes of betrayal. The silence that followed was not just from the crowd, but from the very soul of the WWE Universe, a profound shock that left everyone reeling, grappling with the unthinkable. Roman Reigns vanished. There were no press releases, no defiant tweets, no cryptic social media posts. Just static. A profound, unsettling void where the most dominant figure in sports entertainment had once stood. The vibrant, imposing presence of the tribal chief, once ubiquitous, was suddenly, utterly absent. For 5 agonizing months, the vacuum he left behind grew, becoming a palpable weight on the WWE landscape. The air became thick with rumors, swirling like a malevolent storm. Was he injured beyond repair? Had the betrayal broken his spirit so completely that he retired? Was the tribal chief truly, irrevocably finished? Cameras, those ever-present eyes of the media, caught only fleeting glimpses, spectral apparitions of a bearded Roman Reigns training alone, after midnight, in abandoned, desolate arenas. There were hushed whispers among security guards, their voices laced with a mixture of fear and fascination, about mysterious crates being delivered to an unmarked warehouse in Tampa, crates reportedly filled with tactical gear, and, most ominously, Roman's old Shield riot masks, freshly repainted in sinister matte black and crimson red. These fragments, these whispers, these fleeting shadows, coalesced into a single, terrifying truth: something was brewing. Something dark, something vengeful, something entirely new was being forged in the crucible of silence and solitude. While Roman toiled in the shadows, Heyman's empire ran rampant, a venomous blight on the WWE landscape. Paul Heyman, with his characteristic smug grin and manipulative genius, now paraded Jimmy Uso, the undisputed champion, as his prized possession. Alongside them, Seth Rollins, clutching his newly acquired money-in-the-bank briefcase, and the formidable, brutal Braun Breaker, their enforcer, completed a triumvirate of terror. They brutalized anyone daring to mention the tribal chief's name, their actions a perverse celebration of their perceived victory over Roman's legacy. Championships piled up around them, a grotesque monument to their unchecked power, while backstage morale plummeted, leaving a palpable sense of fear and hopelessness among the roster. The Heyman Empire was an oppressive force, seemingly untouchable, a dominant regime that choked out all hope of resistance, or so it seemed. Their arrogance grew with each passing week, each brutal assault, each championship victory, creating an atmosphere of despair that permeated every segment of Raw and SmackDown. Then came Money in the Bank 2025, a night that was meant to cement Heyman's reign as an unassailable dynasty. Jimmy Uso, in a display of newfound ruthlessness, retained the undisputed title with a chilling display of cunning and brute force, further solidifying the Empire's grip on the main event scene. Seth Rollins, ever the opportunist, had successfully claimed the Money in the Bank briefcase earlier that night, ensuring a guaranteed future championship reign for the Heyman loyalists. The post-show press conference, a traditionally celebratory affair, was underway, with Heyman basking in the glow of his faction's seemingly insurmountable success, pontificating on their omnipotence, when, without warning, the broadcast feed cut to static. The jarring interruption was brief, but what followed was etched into the minds of every viewer, a single, ominous word burned across the screen. Dominion. Nobody knew what it meant. The commentators were baffled, the reporters bewildered, and the fans in the arena and at home were left with a profound sense of unease. Was it a glitch? A hack? A new faction? The cryptic message hung in the air, a silent, chilling promise of upheaval. It was an unsettling ripple effect, a hairline crack in the Empire's seemingly impenetrable facade. This single word, flashing for mere seconds, was a subtle but undeniable precursor, an ominous drumbeat before the thunderous return. It was the moment the world should have understood that the game had changed, that the rules were being rewritten, that the true tribal chief had not been broken, but simply had gone dark, preparing his terrifying rebirth. And then, the following Monday, it happened. The air thick with that familiar hum of static, the arena lights, without warning, blacked out entirely. A collective gasp rippled through the thousands in attendance, followed by a sudden, expectant silence. It was a silence deeper than any normal lull, a void pregnant with anticipation, a primordial darkness that seemed to swallow all sound. The ominous, rhythmic drumbeat, barely perceptible at first, began to echo through the rafters, slowly building in intensity, each thud a hammer blow against the collective heart of the WWE Universe. This wasn't just a lights-out segment, this was a theatrical performance, a prelude to something monumental. The crowd, accustomed to the theatrics of wrestling, knew this was different. This was the moment. This was the return. The question wasn't if, but how. And more importantly, who. Because this time everything was about to change. Nothing, absolutely nothing, would unfold the way anyone thought it would. Least of all, the shocking inclusion of a man whose very name once embodied comedy in WWE, the man everyone underestimated, R-Truth. The pulsating energy of WrestleMania 41 was a force unto itself, a spectacle of human endeavor and emotional crescendo. For Roman Reigns, it wasn't just another main event. It was the culmination of an epic, the apex of a reign that had transcended mere championship statistics to become a dominant cultural phenomenon. He entered the colossal stadium, a coliseum of dreams and shattered hopes, with an almost divine aura. The roar of over 75,000 zealous fans, a tidal wave of adoration and fervent anticipation, crashed over him as he strode down the lengthy ramp. His entrance, usually a deliberate, almost ceremonial walk, seemed infused with an extra layer of gravitas that night. The spotlight, a singular beacon in the vast darkness of the stadium, followed his every measured step, illuminating the sheer weight of his accomplishment. The undisputed WWE Universal Championship, its gold plates gleaming under the arena lights, rested regally on his shoulder, a physical testament to his unparalleled dominance. His eyes, usually betraying a glint of challenge or a flicker of cunning, held a quiet, almost serene confidence. He was the tribal chief, and this was his yard, his kingdom, his moment to etch his name even deeper into the annals of professional wrestling history. There was no doubt in his mind, nor in the minds of millions watching globally, that he would walk out of this arena with the same gold, his legacy gilded in an even more unassailable sheen. The match itself, against an unnamed but formidable challenger, was a grueling, hard-fought epic, a brutal symphony of power, strategy, and resilience that pushed Roman to his limits. Every maneuver was executed with surgical precision, every counter a testament to his seasoned experience. The challenger, desperate for glory, threw everything he had at the champion, demonstrating a tenacity that garnered respect even from the most ardent Reigns detractors. There were moments of genuine peril, near falls that made the crowd gasp collectively, their hopes and fears swinging wildly with each kick out. Roman, however, absorbed the punishment, his face a mask of grim determination, his body a fortress of unyielding will. He kicked out of finishers that had felled lesser men, reversed submissions with Herculean strength, and weathered storms of offense that would have broken anyone else. This was the tribal chief at his peak, demonstrating why he had held the gold for so long, why he was considered the measuring stick, the final boss. The commentary team, their voices hoarse with excitement, spoke of his resilience, his undeniable main event aura, the way he seemed to embody the very spirit of a champion. The narrative was unfolding as expected. Roman Reigns, against all odds, yet again, would find a way to conquer. And then, it happened. Not with a finishing move, not with a strategic pinfall, but with a betrayal so insidious, so utterly unforeseen, that it ripped through the fabric of the story with the force of a cosmic anomaly. The challenger was down, seemingly incapacitated, as Roman Reigns, with a triumphant roar, signaled for the spear. The crowd, anticipating the decisive blow, rose to its feet, a collective gasp of anticipation escaping their lips. He took a few steps back, focused, then burst forward, a missile of muscle and momentum aimed squarely at his prostrate opponent. But just as he launched, a shadowy figure, emerging from seemingly nowhere, materialized in the ring. It was Jimmy Uso. The world seemed to slow to a crawl. The vivid colors of the arena blurred into a kaleidoscope of shock. The roar of the crowd choked off, replaced by an audible, collective gasp, then a stunned, disbelieving silence. Roman, mid-flight, his eyes fixed on his target, caught a flicker of movement in his periphery. He recognized the familiar silhouette, the distinct braided hair, the iconic chain. His own cousin. His brother. The man who had stood by him through thick and thin, through every trial and tribulation of the bloodline. There was no time to process, no time to react. In a sickening, visceral flash, Jimmy Uso delivered a super kick, not to the challenger, but directly to Roman Reigns' jaw. The impact was brutal, a concussive shockwave that sent Roman spinning violently through the air, his body collapsing in an awkward heap next to the unconscious challenger. The championship, previously a symbol of his unbreakable reign, clattered to the mat with a hollow, metallic clang, a sound that echoed the emptiness now forming in the hearts of millions. Roman lay there, prone, disoriented, his eyes wide with a mixture of pain and utter disbelief. He saw Jimmy standing over him, his face devoid of the usual mirth, instead a cold, hardened mask of resentment and calculated malice. It wasn't just a super kick, it was a dagger to the soul, a betrayal of blood, family, and everything the bloodline had stood for. The referee, caught in the chaos, quickly turned to count the pin on the original challenger, whose pinfall attempt by Roman was now nullified by Jimmy's interference. The challenger, now inexplicably revived or simply playing possum, rolled over, draped an arm over Roman, and the count began. 1, 2, 3. The bell rang. The sound was a deafening, mournful toll. It wasn't the triumphant clang of a champion's victory, but the death knell of an era. The undisputed WWE Universal Championship, once so firmly in Roman Reigns' grasp, was now gone. The crowd was a tableau of stunned disbelief. Jaws hung open, eyes were wide, and the silence was so profound it bordered on reverence for the tragedy that had just unfolded. Faces contorted in confusion, then slowly, agonizingly, shifted to anger as the reality set in. And then, the second, equally devastating blow. As Roman lay defeated, confused, Jimmy Uso, his eyes burning with a chilling, almost manic intensity, turned to face the entrance ramp. From the darkness, stepping into the harsh glare of the spotlights, emerged Paul Heyman. But this wasn't the devoted, frantic counsel we had known. Heyman's face, usually contorted in concern or passionate advocacy for his tribal chief, was now alight with a smug, almost triumphant sneer. He held up a ripped, crimson-red lei, a symbol of the bloodline, and cast it disdainfully to the floor. Then, with a theatrical flourish, he embraced Jimmy Uso, a gesture of conspiratorial triumph that sent a fresh wave of shock through the stadium. The bloodline is dead. Heyman's voice, amplified by the arena's sound system, boomed with a chilling clarity. Long live the Heyman Empire. The words hung in the air, a declaration of war, a proclamation of a new, twisted dynasty built on betrayal and opportunism. Jimmy Uso stood beside Heyman, his chest puffed out, a defiant, almost feral glint in his eyes. He pointed down at Roman Reigns, still struggling to comprehend the depth of the treachery, a single, sickening finger symbolizing his absolute rejection of his former tribal chief. The image was searing. Heyman, the mastermind, now free from the perceived shackles of Roman's authority, Jimmy, the loyal soldier turned bitter betrayer, and Roman, the once unconquerable king, lying defeated, his crown shattered, his kingdom dissolved, all in front of 75,000 stunned fans. It was a moment of profound psychological trauma, a public execution of a dynasty, and the birth of a new, malignant power. The bloodline, once a symbol of unbreakable familial unity and dominance, had not just fractured, it had disintegrated, leaving behind only shattered pride, echoes of betrayal, and the bitter taste of ashes. The profound emotional weight of this moment resonated deeply, depicting it not just as a wrestling storyline, but as a visceral stab in the back that defied the very sacred bonds of family. The chilling tableau that unfolded on the WrestleMania 41 stage was a masterclass in premeditated cruelty, a surgical strike against the very heart of the tribal chief's empire. Paul Heyman, the self-proclaimed wise man, had always operated in the shadows, his brilliance undeniable, his loyalty seemingly unshakable. He had been Roman Reigns' most fervent advocate, his strategic confidant, the vocal amplifier of his dominance. For years, Heyman had navigated the intricate politics of the locker room, deflected criticism, and spun narratives that consistently elevated Roman to mythical status. He was the voice, the brain, the ruthless pragmatism behind Roman's seemingly invincible reign. Yet, in that sickening moment, his eyes, usually blazing with an almost religious zeal for Roman's cause, now glinted with a cold, triumphant malevolence that revealed his true, unbridled ambition. His motives, in retrospect, seemed to unravel with a terrifying clarity. Heyman wasn't loyal to a person, he was loyal to power. He hadn't just guided Roman. He had studied him, learned his weaknesses, and meticulously orchestrated his downfall from within. This wasn't merely a tactical maneuver, it was the ultimate power play, a strategic masterpiece designed to dismantle Roman's legacy and build his own, with a younger, more malleable puppet in Jimmy Uso. Heyman's history was littered with the remnants of factions he had built and then, often, abandoned or betrayed. From ECW to the Dangerous Alliance, from advocating for Brock Lesnar to CM Punk, his pattern was consistent. He aligned with the strongest, the most dominant, only to leverage their power for his own gain. But this felt different. This felt personal. This was a betrayal on a familial level, a rupture of a bond that had been paraded as sacred. The image of Heyman, his arm around Jimmy, their faces a mirror of shared villainy, cemented the chilling reality. Heyman hadn't just defected, he had defected with the very weapon that struck Roman down. He hadn't just broken the bloodline, he had twisted its very essence into something grotesque and unrecognizable. The dissolution of the bloodline was not merely a storyline development, for many, it was a tragedy. This wasn't just a wrestling faction, it was a narrative woven into the fabric of Roman's real-life family, his heritage, his identity. The red lei, now discarded and torn, was a potent symbol of this destruction. It represented not just a team, but a lineage, a shared history, a code of honor that had been defiled. The bloodline had stood for solidarity, for strength and unity, for the idea that family comes first. To see Jimmy, a blood brother, a man who had shared countless battles and triumphs with Roman, deliver the ultimate act of treachery was a gut punch. It wasn't just a superkick to Roman's jaw, it was a superkick to the very notion of loyalty, to the idea that blood bonds were unbreakable in the cutthroat world of WWE. The emotional fallout was immediate and widespread. Social media exploded, a torrent of disbelief, anger, and sorrow. Wrestling forums buzzed with furious debate, fans struggling to reconcile the Roman Reigns they knew with the broken figure on the canvas. Commentators, visibly shaken, struggled to find words, their usual professional composure shattered by the raw, visceral nature of the betrayal. This wasn't just a heel turn, it was a fundamental shift in the moral landscape of WWE. The lines had blurred, not between good and evil, but between loyalty and treachery, between family and ambition. As Paul Heyman and Jimmy Uso exited the arena, their faces etched with a chilling mixture of triumph and defiance, the echoes of their proclamation, the Heyman Empire, seemed to hang in the air, a dark cloud settling over the entire stadium. Roman Reigns remained on the mat, not just defeated, but utterly dismantled. His body ached, but the pain in his heart, the sting of betrayal, was far more profound. The crowd, slowly, agonizingly, began to process the enormity of what they had witnessed. This was not the end of a match, it was the end of an era. The bloodline was dead, annihilated by internal strife and external manipulation, leaving Roman Reigns alone in the wreckage of his shattered empire, a ghost in the Colosseum where he was meant to be king. The silence that followed their departure was not triumphant, but heavy, expectant, and pregnant with the promise of a reckoning that no one could yet foresee. The stage was set, not for a continuation, but for a rebirth born from the ashes of betrayal. The immediate aftermath of WrestleMania 41 was defined by an almost terrifying silence, a vacuum that swallowed the usual post-event media frenzy, the congratulatory messages, and the defiant promises of future dominance. Roman Reigns, the undisputed, the tribal chief, simply vanished. He didn't issue a statement, there were no cryptic social media posts, no carefully curated interviews hinting at a comeback. His online presence, once a meticulously managed extension of his tribal chief persona, went dark. Tweets were deleted, Instagram accounts lay dormant, official WWE channels offered no explanations. It was as if the most dominant figure in professional wrestling had been unwritten from existence, leaving behind only a gaping, echoing void where his presence had once been all-consuming. This wasn't just a wrestler taking time off, this was an eclipse. The sudden, complete absence sent shockwaves through the WWE Universe, far more profound than any defeat could have caused. Initial theories, whispered in hushed tones in fan forums and across social media platforms, ranged from the mundane to the apocalyptic. Was he severely injured, the super kick from Jimmy Uso a more devastating blow than anyone realized? Was he, in the wake of such a profound betrayal, simply broken, his spirit shattered beyond repair, forcing an unexpected retirement? The idea that the man who had defied every challenge, overcome every obstacle, and stood atop the mountain for so long could be felled by a single act of familial treachery was almost too much to bear. It felt incomplete, unsatisfying, and fundamentally unjust. The hunger for answers became a ravenous beast, growing with each passing day of silence. The WWE landscape, accustomed to Roman's omnipresent shadow, felt unnervingly hollow. Shows lacked a definitive main event presence, a top-tier villain whose defeat was the ultimate prize, or a heroic figure whose journey captivated millions. The void was palpable, affecting not just the storylines, but the very energy of the broadcasts. Commentators spoke in hushed, speculative tones, avoiding direct pronouncements about Roman's fate, a clear directive from higher powers. The uncertainty itself became a character in the ongoing drama, a phantom presence that haunted every segment, every championship match. Fans yearned for any sign, any whisper, any indication that their tribal chief, whether hated or adored, would return. The silence was not passive. It was an active, gnawing force, a constant reminder of the betrayal and the terrifying potential of its aftermath. As weeks bled into months, the rumor mill churned with increasing fervor, each speculative whisper adding another layer to the enigma of Roman's disappearance. It wasn't just idle gossip, it was a desperate attempt by the WWE Universe to fill the void, to construct a narrative in the absence of official updates. The stories that emerged were often contradictory, sometimes outlandish, but always fueled by a collective hunger for information. One of the most persistent and unnerving narratives revolved around the Tampa warehouse enigma. Whispers began to circulate from within the periphery of WWE's operations, from low-level security guards and logistics personnel. They spoke of mysterious crates, unmarked and unlabeled, being delivered under the cloak of night to an undisclosed, unmarked warehouse in a remote industrial park in Tampa. The deliveries were clandestine, handled by a skeleton crew under strict non-disclosure agreements. These were not the usual brightly colored crates of merchandising or ring equipment, these were heavy, military-grade containers, delivered with an almost obsessive secrecy. The few individuals who managed to glimpse their contents spoke of unsettling cargo, not wrestling attire, but tactical gear. Matte black ballistic vests, military-grade elbow and knee pads, lightweight but seemingly indestructible gauntlets, and high-performance combat boots. There were specialized fabrics, designed for agility and protection, hinting at a radical departure from Roman's traditional single-sleeve, vest and cargo pants ensemble. But the most chilling detail, the one that truly sent shivers down the spine of anyone who heard it, was the mention of the Shield riot masks. Not new ones, but Roman's old masks from his initial dominant faction, the ones synonymous with ruthless efficiency and calculated destruction. These iconic symbols of his past were reportedly being meticulously repainted, not in the original black and gray, but in a sinister new palette of matte black and crimson red. The crimson, a vivid, almost blood-like hue, stood out starkly against the deep, unforgiving black, hinting at a darker purpose, a more violent intent. Security guards, usually hardened by years of mundane observation, spoke in hushed tones of an unsettling aura emanating from the warehouse, a sense of an unspoken, formidable power being meticulously assembled within its walls. The air itself seemed to vibrate with a contained menace, as if a storm was slowly, deliberately brewing. This was no ordinary training regimen, this was the methodical preparation for war. Adding to the growing mythology were the fleeting, almost ghostly, accounts of midnight training sessions. Stories emerged from custodians, late-night maintenance crews, and even local law enforcement patrolling desolate industrial zones. They spoke of glimpsing a solitary figure, unmistakably Roman Reigns, his signature hair now longer, his face obscured by a thick, untamed beard, training alone in abandoned arenas, after midnight. These weren't sanctioned WWE facilities. These were forgotten gymnasiums, derelict sports complexes, cavernous, echoing spaces that had long since been abandoned by the light of day. The descriptions were haunting, the rhythmic thud of a body hitting a worn mat, the sharp clang of weights being dropped, the guttural grunts of exertion echoing in the oppressive silence of the empty venues. No entourage, no cameraman, no social media updates, just a lone warrior, pushing his physical and mental limits to an extreme degree. This solitary training was not about maintaining peak performance, it was about transformation. The physical description spoke of a leaner, harder physique, one honed not for flashy performance, but for raw, visceral effectiveness. The beard, a symbol of his disappearance, also marked a profound internal shift. It was the face of a man who had withdrawn from the world, consumed by a singular, all-encompassing purpose. His mental state during this period must have been a maelstrom of raw anger, burning resentment, and an ice-cold, calculating determination. Every lift, every strike, every grueling session was a manifestation of his rage, a deliberate act of forging a new identity in the crucible of isolation and betrayal. He wasn't just getting back into shape, he was reforging himself, stripping away the layers of the tribal chief persona to reveal something more primal, more dangerous, more vengeful. The very solitude underscored the depth of his broken trust. He trusted no one, relying only on his own relentless will to rebuild. The tactical gear in the warehouse and the solitary training sessions were not disparate events, they were pieces of a meticulous, terrifying puzzle, each indicating a profound shift in Roman's approach and intent. This prolonged silence, punctuated only by these cryptic rumors and fleeting glimpses, gave birth to a phenomenon that could only be described as the cult of anticipation. The absence of official communication created a fertile ground for wild speculation, turning every fan into an amateur detective, every theory a potential prophecy. Social media platforms, from Twitter to Reddit, became echo chambers of what-ifs and I knew it's. Podcasts dedicated hours to dissecting every rumor, every potential clue, no matter how tenuous. Fan art depicted Roman Reigns in various states of transformation, from broken and defeated to vengeful and monstrous. Even the most outlandish theories, Roman joining a new, underground fight club, Roman seeking spiritual guidance from ancient Samoan elders, Roman training with former military operatives, gained traction simply due to the sheer lack of information. The hunger for his return morphed into an almost desperate yearning, tinged with a growing sense of dread. What kind of Roman Reigns would emerge from this self-imposed exile? Would he be broken, or would he be an unstoppable, terrifying force unlike anything the WWE Universe had ever witnessed? The uncertainty was a constant, simmering presence in the WWE narrative, a subtle tension that underlay every show, every segment. The silence wasn't empty. It was pregnant with possibility, growing heavier and more ominous with each passing day. It bred a unique brand of suspense, far more potent than any scheduled match could provide. The WWE Universe knew, deep down, that when Roman Reigns finally decided to break his silence, it wouldn't be with a whimper or a simple return. It would be with a cataclysmic roar, a declaration of war, and a profound, terrifying metamorphosis. The 5 months of darkness were not a period of recovery, but a gestation, preparing for the birth of something entirely new, entirely destructive. It wasn't just a hiatus, it was a strategic withdrawal, a tactical retreat into the shadows to sharpen the blade of vengeance, to forge a new identity unburdened by past loyalties, and to prepare for a conquest that would redefine dominance itself. As the enigma of Roman Reigns' disappearance deepened into a gnawing silence, the vacuum he left was swiftly, ruthlessly filled by the emergence of a new, oppressive regime, the Heyman Empire. This wasn't merely a faction, it was a brutal consolidation of power, a testament to Paul Heyman's unparalleled cunning and his ability to turn betrayal into dominance. With Roman gone, Heyman, the self-proclaimed wise man, no longer had to operate in the shadows of the tribal chief's immense presence. He was now the undisputed architect, the public face of a new era defined by unchecked ambition and ruthless efficiency. And at the heart of this new empire were his chosen enforcers, Jimmy Uso, the undisputed champion and primary beneficiary of the WrestleMania betrayal, Seth Rollins, the ever-opportunistic visionary now clutching the money in the bank briefcase like a second, more volatile championship. And the formidable, unbridled force of Braun Breaker, a living, breathing weapon unleashed to enforce Heyman's will. Their reign began not with a subtle consolidation, but with an immediate, unmistakable declaration of war against the very memory of Roman Reigns. Anyone, from an aspiring rookie to a seasoned veteran, who dared to mention the tribal chief's name, to question the legitimacy of Jimmy Uso's title reign, or even to hint at the possibility of Roman's return, became an immediate target. These weren't subtle warnings, they were public, humiliating beatdowns designed to send a chilling message. Jimmy Uso, once a charismatic high-flyer, now carried an air of chilling arrogance, his eyes cold and devoid of the warmth that once defined him. His super kicks, once performed with a playful swagger, were now delivered with a malicious intent, aimed not just at winning matches, but at inflicting maximum pain and psychological damage. He would hold opponents down, allowing Rollins to stomp on their hands, or Breaker to unleash a barrage of bone-jarring tackles. These acts weren't about proving wrestling superiority, they were about crushing dissent, extinguishing hope, and erasing the memory of the past. The first few weeks saw a systematic dismantling of any lingering loyalty to Roman. Backstage, segments often showed Heyman, standing imperiously beside Jimmy, Rollins, and Breaker, watching replays of Jimmy's betrayal at WrestleMania. Heyman would cackle, his voice dripping with condescension, as he narrated the liberation of Jimmy Uso from Roman's tyranny. This narrative, while infuriating to Roman's remaining loyalists, was an effective tool of psychological warfare, slowly eroding the faith of a locker room that had once stood in awe of the tribal chief. Anyone who pushed back, anyone who muttered a challenge or even looked Heyman in the eye with defiance, would find themselves scheduled for a tune-up match against Braun Breaker, matches that inevitably devolved into brutal, one-sided assaults, often ending with the opponent being left unconscious in the center of the ring, a clear warning etched into their battered bodies. The championships piled up around the Heyman Empire like trophies of war, each piece of gold a testament to their unchecked power and the stark lack of any effective opposition. Jimmy Uso, the newly crowned undisputed WWE Universal Champion, carried the gold with an almost insolent ease, his every gesture radiating contempt for the legacy he had usurped. Seth Rollins, leveraging his money in the bank contract, would frequently tease cash-ins, creating an atmosphere of constant unease, and when he did strike, it was with calculated cruelty, ensuring victories were swift and demoralizing. He became a predatory shadow, his cackling laughter echoing through the arena as he stole wins, often from unsuspecting champions. Braun Breaker, a powerhouse of raw aggression, soon claimed the Intercontinental Championship, cementing the Empire's dominance over the mid-card, turning every title defense into a display of pure, unadulterated brutality. Their victories weren't just about winning, they were about humiliating, about demonstrating their absolute, unquestionable superiority. Each championship defense was a showcase of their combined might, a clear message that this was not just a temporary alliance, but a fully fledged, gold-laden regime. The impact on the backstage morale was catastrophic. It plummeted like a stone, leaving a palpable sense of fear, desperation, and even paranoia pervading the locker room. Wrestlers, once vibrant and hopeful, now walked with a weary slump, their eyes darting nervously when Heyman or his enforcers passed by. The promise of fair competition, the hope for a title shot based on merit, seemed to evaporate under the Empire's iron fist. The trial by fire, a precursor to Roman's trial by conquest, became an unspoken rule. To even consider challenging any member of the Empire meant inviting a merciless beatdown. Ambition was replaced by resignation, camaraderie by guarded suspicion. No one trusted anyone else, fearing that a misspoken word or a defiant glance could mark them for retribution. The locker room was no longer a place of competitive spirit, but a crucible of fear, with whispers of Heyman's spies and informants adding to the pervasive sense of dread. The silence from Roman Reigns, once a source of hope, now felt like an abandonment, leaving the rest of the roster to fend for themselves against an insurmountable tide. The perception of their invincibility, of being the untouchables, grew with each passing week. They dominated every broadcast, their faces plastered across promotional materials, their victories showcased relentlessly. Their entrances were longer, their poses more defiant, their rhetoric more inflammatory. Heyman's promo segments became a weekly sermon, preaching the gospel of their dominance, mocking the fallen tribal chief, and deriding anyone who still believed in the old ways. He would often bring out the torn remnants of Roman's bloodline lay, or display a damaged photo of Roman, to visually underscore his points. This wasn't just a wrestling show, it was a psychological operation, designed to convince the audience, and more importantly, the locker room, that the Heyman Empire was an eternal, unshakable force. The internal dynamics of this new faction, while seemingly cohesive on the surface, were a volatile mix of ambition and simmering resentment. Seth Rollins, ever the opportunist, reveled in the chaotic environment Heyman created. His cackling laughter and flamboyant attire masked a calculated mind, always looking for his next angle, his next advantage. He viewed his alliance with Heyman as a stepping stone, a temporary necessity to further his own visionary agenda, even if it meant playing second fiddle to Jimmy Uso in the immediate future. He wasn't truly loyal to Heyman, but to the power Heyman wielded. Jimmy Uso, however, was a more complex figure. His resentment towards Roman Reigns ran deep, festering during what he perceived as years of being overlooked and subservient within the bloodline. Heyman had expertly exploited this bitterness, fanning the flames of perceived injustice and offering Jimmy the ultimate prize, the undisputed championship and the center stage spotlight. Jimmy's newfound ruthlessness was a manifestation of that pent-up anger, a defiant roar against the shadow of his cousin. He genuinely believed he was the rightful tribal chief, the true head of the family, and Heyman was merely helping him reclaim what was rightfully his. His loyalty to Heyman, while strong, was rooted in this shared animosity towards Roman. And then there was Braun Breaker, the unyielding, almost feral enforcer. Breaker was pure, unadulterated aggression, a force of nature driven by instinct and a thirst for destruction. He didn't care about the intricacies of Heyman's machinations or the nuanced resentments between cousins. He was a blunt instrument, perfectly content to inflict pain and dismantle opponents at Heyman's command. His loyalty was simplistic, Heyman pointed, and Breaker attacked. He was the muscle, the brute force that ensured the Empire's words were backed by devastating action. Together, they formed a formidable, almost insurmountable force, their individual motivations converging into a singular, destructive purpose, to utterly obliterate any lingering trace of Roman Reigns' legacy and cement the Heyman Empire as the new, unchallenged standard of dominance. The longer Roman's silence persisted, the more deeply entrenched their rule became, creating an atmosphere of suffocating despair and the chilling belief that no one could ever stand against them. The WWE Universe watched, helpless and frustrated, as the Heyman Empire ran rampant, their arrogance growing with every passing week, their shadows stretching across the entire landscape of professional wrestling. The stage was being meticulously set for a reckoning, but the question remained, who, if anyone, would dare to challenge this reign of cruelty? The path of the Heyman Empire seemed set, paved with gold and cemented by fear. Their dominance had become an undeniable truth, a suffocating blanket draped over the WWE Universe. And then came Money in the Bank 2025. It wasn't just another pay-per-view, it was meant to be the grand coronation, the moment that irrevocably cemented Paul Heyman's reign as an unassailable, eternal dynasty. The air inside the packed arena was electric with anticipation, but it was an anticipation tinged with a grim acceptance of the inevitable. Everyone knew who held the power, and that power seemed destined only to grow. The night unfolded precisely as Heyman had orchestrated, a symphony of his strategic genius and his enforcer's brutal efficiency. Jimmy Uso, the man who had plunged the knife into Roman Reigns' back, stood in the main event, defending his undisputed WWE Universal Championship. His opponent, a formidable challenger who had fought tooth and nail through the fractured locker room, presented a genuine threat. But Jimmy, fueled by a venomous resentment and a chilling new ruthlessness instilled by Heyman, proved to be more cunning and brutal than ever. The match was a grueling affair, a testament to both men's resilience. Yet, when the dust settled, it was Jimmy Uso, with a timely assist from a distraction orchestrated by Heyman at ringside, who emerged victorious. The referee's hand slammed down for the 3 count, and the bell tolled, not just for a match, but for another notch in the Heyman Empire's belt. Jimmy clutched the gold, his face a mask of defiant triumph, a chilling mirror of his mentor's smug satisfaction. His retention of the undisputed title was a powerful statement, reinforcing his status as the new, albeit usurping, face of the company. It was a painful reminder that the ghost of Roman Reigns seemed to have no power to disrupt the Empire's ascension. Earlier in the night, the opportunistic visionary, Seth Rollins, had entered the highly anticipated Money in the Bank ladder match. The multi-man scramble was a chaotic spectacle, a dizzying array of high spots, daring risks, and brutal impacts. Superstars battered each other, climbed perilous heights, and crashed through tables, all in pursuit of the coveted briefcase suspended high above the ring. Rollins, with his theatrical flair and undeniable athleticism, navigated the pandemonium with a predatory grace. He wasn't the heroic figure he sometimes portrayed. Tonight, he was a calculating predator, leveraging every advantage, every moment of chaos. He utilized his knowledge of the ring, his cunning, and even a subtle, uncharacteristic interference from Braun Breaker at a crucial moment, to dispatch his rivals. When he finally scaled the ladder, his face twisted in a triumphant, almost maniacal grin, and unhooked the briefcase. It solidified the Heyman Empire's complete stranglehold on the future. With Jimmy holding the top title and Rollins possessing a guaranteed championship opportunity at any time, anywhere, the Empire's dominance felt absolute. They weren't just the present, they were now the undisputed future of WWE. The sense of Heyman's reign being firmly cemented permeated the entire post-show atmosphere. The press conference, usually a scene of tired but jubilant champions recounting their victories, became a victory lap for the Heyman Empire. Paul Heyman, impeccably dressed, stood at the podium, flanked by his champions, Jimmy and Rollins, with Breaker looming imposingly behind them. Heyman pontificated with his usual oratorical flourish, his voice dripping with condescension as he spoke of their unassailable power, their strategic genius, and the folly of anyone who had ever doubted them. He reveled in the demise of the bloodline, openly mocking Roman Reigns' absence and declaring his empire an eternal, unbreakable force. Reporters, intimidated by the palpable arrogance radiating from the group, asked timid questions, their usual journalistic tenacity dulled by the weight of the Empire's recent dominance. The broadcast feed, beamed globally, captured every moment of their triumphant, almost tyrannical, press conference. And then, it happened. Without warning, without a single flicker of static or a preceding technical glitch, the broadcast feed cut to static. It wasn't a temporary blip. It was a complete, jarring, and unnerving blackout. The sophisticated cameras and microphones, moments ago capturing Heyman's smug pronouncements, now transmitted only a harsh, incessant hiss and a fractured, pixelated screen. The confident voices of the commentators, who had been analyzing the Empire's dominant night, abruptly fell silent, their initial surprise giving way to confusion. There was no explanation, no apology from the control room. Just the raw, abrasive white noise. The silence from the announcers, the sudden blackness, created a chilling void. And then, from the depths of that electronic chaos, a single, stark word burned across the screen. Not in vibrant color, but in a cold, stark white font that stood out against the swirling static, as if seared directly onto the retina of every viewer: Dominion. It hung there for only a few agonizing seconds, a stark, solitary declaration, before the feed abruptly, jarringly, snapped back to the triumphant faces of the Heyman Empire. Heyman, mid-sentence, stumbled, his confident smirk faltering into a flicker of confusion, then annoyance. Jimmy Uso's defiant posture stiffened, his eyes narrowed, searching for a source of the disruption. Rollins, ever perceptive, felt a chill run down his spine, a sense of foreboding that shattered his usual bravado. The brief, unsettling interruption left them momentarily flustered, their carefully constructed aura of invincibility momentarily cracked. The impact on the WWE Universe was immediate and profound. Nobody, from the casual fan to the most ardent wrestling analyst, knew what it meant. Was it a new video game? A cryptic advertising campaign? A technical malfunction that somehow coincidentally displayed a single, powerful word? The confusion was widespread, but beneath it, a deeper current began to flow, a sense of unease, a primal, almost instinctive recognition that this wasn't just random. This was a message. A declaration. A seed of doubt planted in the fertile ground of the Heyman Empire's seeming omnipotence. The Dominion graphic became an instant sensation on social media, a hashtag that trended globally within minutes. Fans frantically speculated, dissecting every pixel, every possible interpretation. Was it a new stable? A returning superstar? A cryptic warning from Roman Reigns himself? The questions swirled, unanswered and unanswerable, fueling an intense, almost desperate curiosity. The word itself, dominion, carried a heavy weight, implying power, control, conquest. It was a stark contrast to the celebratory tone of the press conference, a dissonant chord struck in the symphony of the Empire's triumph. It created an unsettling ripple effect, a hairline crack in the Empire's seemingly impenetrable facade, hinting at an unseen force lurking in the shadows, waiting for its moment to strike. This cryptic message, though fleeting, was a palpable tremor, a subtle but undeniable precursor to the paradigm shift that was about to engulf the entire WWE landscape. It was the first, chilling whisper of the storm that would soon break, an ominous foreshadowing that would soon transform into a terrifying reality.